On the morning of May 25th, 2019, in Logan, Utah, a 5-year-old girl named Elizabeth Shelley went to bed and never woke up in her own home again.
On May 25th at 10 a.m. in the morning, Logan City Police Department was notified of a tragic, or what was going to unfold as a tragic event.
By 9:30 a.m., her mother was standing in an empty bedroom, staring at cold blankets and a front door that was wide open. No noise had been heard. No struggle had taken place. The neighborhood was silent. Lizzy was simply gone. But here is what made this case immediately different from every parent's worst nightmare. Investigators were not looking for a stranger. From the very first hours of that search, something far more sinister was already brewing inside the details of that household, and the answers were closer than anyone wanted to believe. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Logan, Utah is the kind of place where people still trust their neighbors. Nestled in the Cache Valley, framed by the Wasatch Mountains to the east and the Bear River Range to the west, it is a university town, a community town, the kind of place where front doors are left unlocked and children play in the streets without anyone holding their breath. It is exactly the kind of place where the most sinister thing imaginable feels like it belongs somewhere else. Not here, not in this valley, but on that Saturday morning, Logan became the center of a story that would reach every corner of the country, and the community that prided itself on safety would be forced to confront a truth that no amount of small-town peace could have prepared anyone for. Elizabeth Jessica Shelley was born on December 10th, 2013. Everyone called her Lizzy. She was 5 years old, bright, cheerful, and the kind of child who collected wildflowers and pointed out rainbows like they were personal gifts from the sky. She lived on 100 South 400 West in Logan with her mother Jessica Whipple, Jessica's fiancé Dietrich Black, and her baby sister Maddie. Her days were supposed to be filled with imagination and Saturday morning plans. On the night of May 24th, 2019, none of that had changed. The family went about their evening the way any ordinary family would. They had no reason to believe the night ahead was anything other than ordinary. They were wrong. Jessica Whipple had a younger brother named Alex Whipple. He was 21 years old. His life had been difficult, and his record reflected it. In September 2018, he had been convicted of receiving stolen property, a second-degree felony, after taking a vehicle belonging to his own grandfather without permission while the man was out of town. Utah state troopers pursued him for approximately 40 miles before he was stopped. He was also convicted of failure to stop at the command of a law enforcement officer and driving under the influence. He was placed on probation. That probation was still active in May of 2019, with one of its conditions being steady employment. When that lapsed, a warrant had already been issued for his arrest. He was a wanted man, and on the evening of May 24th, 2019, he was sleeping on his sister's couch. Jessica had reached out to him 2 weeks earlier when he had asked for help, driving nearly 30 miles to Brigham City to bring him back to Logan. On the night of May 24th, he messaged her again through Facebook. She invited him over. He arrived at the family home around 10 p.m. Lizzy and her baby sister were already asleep. Jessica, Dietrich, and Alex spent the evening drinking beer, drinking rum, and playing video games. Nothing about the night seemed alarming. Around midnight, Jessica went to bed. Before she did, she slipped quietly into Lizzy's room and kissed her goodnight. Lizzy was asleep, wearing a teal skirt trimmed with white lace and a red 4th of July themed tank top. Not long after, around 1 a.m., Dietrich also looked in on her before heading to bed. She was peaceful and undisturbed. Alex was left on the living room couch. The house went quiet. That is the last ordinary moment in this story. At 9:30 the following morning, Jessica walked down the hallway toward Lizzy's room. The bed was empty. The blankets were cold. The front door was standing wide open. She called Lizzy's name. She searched the house. She ran outside and called her name into a neighborhood that gave nothing back. And then she realized something else. Alex was gone too. His skateboard was still by the door. His cell phone had been left on the couch. Those are not the things a person leaves behind when they decide to step out for a walk. Those are the things a person leaves behind when leaving was not supposed to happen at all. Dietrich Black called 911 at 9:30 a.m. The conversation was brief and devastating. "My daughter is missing." "How old is she?" "She's 5. "What's her name?" "Elizabeth Shelley." Within hours, one of the largest child search operations in Cache County history had been launched. More than 200 officers from federal, county, and city agencies fanned out across Logan. Drones were authorized to sweep a 15-mile radius from the family home. Volunteers arrived by the hundreds. A Facebook page titled Abducted Elizabeth Shelley was created almost immediately and drew massive community support. Neighbors opened their yards. Law enforcement searched canals, brush, alleys, and mulch piles. They called Lizzy's name block after block after block. The palpable fear that had settled over Logan was unlike anything this valley had experienced in living memory. Parents pulled their children close. People stood in their doorways watching search parties move through the streets. Everyone wanted the same thing. They wanted Lizzy to come home. But from the very first hours of the investigation, detectives already had a strong instinct about where the truth was heading. Lead Detective Matt Woods later recalled that the moment he heard both Lizzy and her uncle were missing simultaneously, something shifted for him. The circumstances were disturbing. The open door, the abandoned skateboard, the missing phone, the warrant already out for Alex's arrest. When police confirmed that Whipple had been spotted walking alone in a rural area near Hiram, roughly 10 miles from the family home, Detective Woods was notified immediately. His words afterward were direct. "When I found out he was located without the child, it started to dawn on me that maybe something wasn't going to end well." Shortly after noon on May 25th, Cache County Sheriff's Deputy B. Chestnut came across a man dressed in black walking alone on a remote road near Hiram. He approached. The exchange that followed was one of the more revealing moments of the entire case. The deputy asked the man his name. The man refused to give it. He questioned why he needed to identify himself at all. The deputy explained calmly that a missing child investigation was underway and that cooperation was needed. Alex Whipple continued to resist. He was evasive, distant, and visibly unsettled. When compliance did not come, he was detained. Officers confirmed his identity through other means and placed him under arrest on the spot for violating his active probation terms. He was transported to the Logan City Police Department for questioning. It was approximately 3 p.m. Lizzy had now been missing for over 5 hours. When officers searched Alex at the time of his arrest, what they found was quietly significant. He was carrying a baseball bat. He had drug paraphernalia on him. And he had a 24-ounce can of Pabst Blue Ribbon beer, the same brand that had been consumed at Jessica's home the night before. A separate empty can of the same beer had already been discovered by a neighbor near the family's garage, a detail that was carefully documented. These were not dramatic discoveries on their own, but investigators were not looking at any single object in isolation. They were building a timeline, and every object placed Alex Whipple in a specific place at a specific time, pulling the thread tighter with every piece. At the Logan City Police Department, things became more revealing still. As Alex sat in the interview room waiting to be questioned, officers monitoring him observed something they could not ignore. He was rubbing his hands together repeatedly. Then he began licking them, over and over, as if trying to remove something that would not come off. He was not aware at that moment how closely he was being watched, but investigators were watching everything. When formal questioning began, the spiral of inconsistencies started almost immediately. Asked whether he had been at his sister Jessica's home the previous evening, he said no. He claimed his last visit had been days earlier, then weeks. The timeline kept shifting. When asked directly whether he had seen Jessica recently, he acknowledged contact the day before, but claimed the children had not been present. Each revision was noted. Each contradiction was filed. In investigations like this one, the truth rarely changes. But a lie has to keep changing to survive, and Alex Whipple's account was changing fast. Eventually, he admitted to being at the residence on the night of May 24th. He said he had been drinking with Jessica and Dietrich. He said that sometime in the early morning hours, he had decided to leave and go for a walk because he wanted to give the couple privacy. The explanation landed awkwardly. A man on active probation with a warrant for his arrest, carrying a baseball bat, walking alone at night in rural Utah, leaving behind his phone and skateboard because he wanted to give his sister and her fiancé some space. Investigators sat with that explanation and let it breathe. Then they moved on. When told directly that his 5-year-old niece was missing and feared harmed, Alex's demeanor shifted between frustration and what appeared to be disbelief. He expressed concern. He said he hoped she would be found safe. At one point, he questioned why he was being held in a room at all instead of being out there helping search for her. He spoke at length about how unfair his life had been, how misunderstood he felt within his own family, how people had never given him a real chance. At another point, he volunteered that when he drank heavily, he would sometimes lose awareness and later find himself in legal trouble. He stopped short of specifics. He continued to insist he did not know what had happened to Lizzy. But the physical evidence that officers were simultaneously collecting outside that interview room was beginning to tell a very different story. When Alex was processed at the police department, officers made 2 observations that were immediately flagged and documented. There were visible injuries on his hands, and there was noticeable staining on both his clothing and on his wristwatch. These observations were preserved as evidence. Forensic analysis would later confirm that the staining was connected to Lizzy. That single finding, quiet and clinical in its language, carried the full weight of what had happened inside that Logan home in the hours between 1 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. on May 25, 2019. By Sunday, May 26th, the search had expanded significantly. Law enforcement was now coordinating across multiple agencies with drones, ground teams, and K-9 units. The community of Logan had mobilized in a way that reflected the palpable grief of an entire valley. Local businesses posted Lizzy's photo. Churches organized prayer vigils. The Facebook page tracking the search was growing by thousands of followers daily. A photograph of Lizzy in her bright smile and her colorful clothes circulated across every platform. And still, she had not been found. On Monday, May 27th, law enforcement held a press conference. They urged anyone with any information to come forward. Behind the measured language of that press conference was the growing weight of a case that was becoming darker by the hour. Investigators had already begun recovering physical evidence in the area surrounding the family home and the nearby Bear River Charter School on 400 West. Among the items recovered was a kitchen knife found in the school parking lot. It was later confirmed to be missing from Jessica's home. Forensic testing identified material connected to Lizzy on the blade. In that same area, a PVC pipe was discovered. It carried a reddish substance and bore a partial palm print. That print was subsequently matched to Alex Whipple. The evidence was no longer circumstantial. It was direct, it was sinister, and it was closing in. Approximately 50 yards from the location where the knife and PVC pipe were recovered, investigators made the discovery that stopped everyone in their tracks. Partially concealed in the ground was a small teal skirt trimmed in white lace, the one Lizzy had been wearing when her mother kissed her goodnight. Finding that skirt confirmed what many investigators had feared from the earliest hours of the case. Lizzy had been in that area, and she had not left on her own. With the physical evidence now firmly in place, prosecutors moved forward with formal charges. Alex Whipple was charged with aggravated murder, obstruction of justice, and additional serious offenses connected to Lizzy's disappearance and the handling of her remains. Separate charges included drug possession, failure to identify himself to law enforcement, and unlawful possession of items as a restricted person. The legal weight surrounding him was building quickly, but Lizzy still had not been found. And for her family, that fact was its own unbearable chapter within an already devastating story. For several days, Alex said nothing further. He sat behind the walls of the Cache County Jail while search teams continued working the ground outside. And then on May 29, 2019, for days after Lizzy disappeared, the case took a turn that brought both relief and grief in equal measure. Prosecutors informed Alex and his defense team that the most severe sentencing option available under Utah law would be pursued unless cooperation was provided. Faced with that possibility, Alex agreed to disclose the location of Lizzy's remains. In exchange, prosecutors agreed to remove the death penalty from consideration. His attorney later stated publicly that the decision had been made in order to give the family some measure of closure. Others saw it differently, noting that the timing aligned precisely with self-preservation rather than compassion. But whatever the motivation, what mattered in that moment was that Lizzy could finally come home. Investigators returned to the area Alex described. It was a location that had already been searched. Beneath a tree, in a spot that had previously been checked by ground teams, Lizzy was found. She had been concealed below the surface. The earlier search teams had been looking for a missing child, not conducting a recovery. That distinction is one of the most heartbreaking details in an already heartbreaking case. The confirmation that 5-year-old Elizabeth Shelley had not survived shifted the case from a missing child investigation into something heavier and more final. The community of Logan, Utah, which had spent 4 days holding on to hope, now had to find a way to grieve. Court documents filed in the weeks that followed were clinical in their language, as legal documents always are. But the reality behind that language was devastating. Medical findings confirmed that Lizzy had suffered extreme physical harm. Forensic analysis also confirmed that she had been subjected to a deeply violating act in her final hours. She was 5 years old. She had gone to bed in her favorite outfit in her own home, in a community where people trusted each other, cared for each other, and believed that children were safe. What Alex Whipple did to her in the hours between 1 a.m. and dawn on May 25, 2019, was a betrayal so complete that there are no words in any language capable of fully accounting for it. In the aftermath, those who knew Alex tried to construct some framework of understanding, the way people always do when a crime defies comprehension. His grandfather, Bill Whipple, spoke publicly and acknowledged that Alex's early years had been marked by instability and loss. His mother had left when he was young. His father, though present, worked long hours on the road. There had been foster care. There had been substance use. There had been a pattern of poor decisions that had accumulated into a criminal record and a life that never found solid footing. None of it explained what he did to Lizzy. None of it came close. But it formed the background that the court would later examine during sentencing, a portrait of a young man whose life had gone wrong in ways that were real, but that could never, under any circumstance, justify what happened in that house. In September 2019, Alex Whipple entered a plea agreement. He admitted guilt to 4 of the most serious charges filed against him, including aggravated murder and additional offenses involving a child. In exchange for the guilty plea, other charges were dismissed. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Lizzy's family, that outcome represented the only form of accountability the legal system could offer. It was not enough. It could never be enough. But it was permanent. Alex Whipple will spend every remaining day of his life inside a prison cell. He will never walk free. He will never see another ordinary morning or stand outside under an open sky or experience any of the simple freedoms that he took from a 5-year-old girl who had done nothing in her short life but love wildflowers and rainbows and the warmth of being tucked in at night. At the sentencing hearing, the judge addressed Alex directly and left very little open to interpretation. The court made clear that what had been done was beyond excuse, beyond mitigation, and beyond any framework of understanding that could soften its weight. Family members then approached the podium one by one. They spoke with the kind of raw honesty that only grief this deep can produce. Anger was voiced openly. Heartbreak was voiced openly. Trust, they said, had been shattered in a way that could never be restored. Jessica Whipple, the woman who had driven 30 miles to bring her brother home because she believed in him, who had let him sleep on her couch because she wanted to help him, who had kissed her daughter goodnight hours before everything was taken from her, had to stand in that courtroom and reckon with what that trust had cost her. Throughout the hearing, Alex Whipple sat with his eyes lowered. When the judge invited him to speak, he offered nothing. No statement. No words. Silence. When the proceedings ended, Lizzy's loved ones gathered outside the courthouse beneath an open sky. They released butterflies in her honor, watching them lift into the air and catch the light. It was the kind of tribute that reflected exactly who Lizzy had been. A child who noticed beautiful things. A child who found joy in the ordinary world. A child who deserved every single day she was denied. A memorial service was held on June 3, 2019. Her funeral followed on June 4th. She was laid to rest in a small white casket adorned with colorful butterflies and the words "Live like Lizzy." Guests were asked to bring hand-picked wildflowers, because that is what Lizzy would have wanted. Law enforcement had promised Jessica that her daughter would be brought home and properly laid to rest. That promise was kept. For a family navigating the most devastating loss imaginable, that mattered. Jessica has since spoken about her daughter with the kind of love that does not dim no matter what surrounds it. She believes Lizzy is at peace now, free from harm, free from the circumstances that were forced upon her. And in the years since, Lizzy's name has been carried forward by a community that refuses to let her be forgotten. The butterfly became her symbol, not just of remembrance, but of something that outlasts grief. A little girl who loved wildflowers and pointed out every rainbow she ever saw is not someone the world forgets easily. And Logan, Utah, a town that still believes in its neighbors even after everything it has been through, has made sure of that. This case raises questions that do not have easy answers. How do you protect a child from someone they were never supposed to fear? How does a family reconcile an act of compassion, the simple act of opening a door for someone in need, with the devastation that followed? And how does a community heal from something that happened not in the dark corners of somewhere unfamiliar, but right in the middle of an ordinary neighborhood on an ordinary Friday night? There are no clean answers. There is only the truth of what happened, the permanence of the accountability that followed, and the name of a little girl that deserves to be spoken with love every time it is said. Elizabeth Shelley. Lizzy, 5 years old, gone too soon, and never, ever forgotten. If this story moved you, if it made you hold someone you love a little closer tonight, please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.